actually worried about it being super sharp here. What I'm looking for is tip geometry. That's the most important thing. When you get rounded tips, very bad for penetration. These very steep and sharp tips are great for penetration. That's what I'm after, and I'm going to show you how to develop that a little bit more too. Hey guys, Ryan Gill here with HuntPrimitive, where we entertain, educate, and inspire. And on this channel we do a lot of primitive hunts or build videos just like this one. So if you're new here, do please consider subscribing. But I have something very special for you today. I'm going to walk through my process on making like seriously scary sharp stone projectiles. We kill a lot, and by we I mean me, number one, 2, my friends and associates, and 3, my customers. We kill a phenomenal amount of animals all over, realistically, the world, but especially North America, with these stone projectiles. And I am exceptionally confident in the way that I sharpen my stone points. And I've always been very open about sharing that information with you today. And this is going to be another video where I'm going to teach you realistically everything I know. And I like to do a new video once in a while because sometimes I have some new things to say about it. I'm going to teach you how to make your points absolutely scary sharp. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start straight from a preform. Now, if you need to know how to get to this point, I'm going to drop another link down in the description. Hopefully y'all have seen it. I mean, man, if you've been following me for any amount of time, you've seen the intro to flintknapping or flintknapping for beginners video. Go down in the description and click on that, because that's going to teach you everything you need to know to get to this point. This is the advanced version where I'm going to teach you how to notch and sharpen this. And I've done this before, but it's going to be updated, and there's always something new to kind of learn, you know what I'm saying? So there, if you drop it, you stand a good chance of breaking it, but luckily it landed right in my debitage pile. Now what we're going to be working on realistically is using one tool. It's going to be this micro flaker that I make, which is just a steel tipped. Now, one of the things that I typically sell within my kits that I sell is a couple copper tipped ones, but one's flattened for notching. And I do stand by that I think that's a great tool to learn on, because some people do really well with a little steel flaker like this, and then some people do a little bit better with the copper tip stuff, because the copper does grab the stone a little bit better. Some people can struggle with these, but when you get to the point where you understand how these work, they'll work extremely well. Now, you may also say, well, that's not how the Indians did it. They didn't have steel and they didn't have copper. I know. I've got plenty of videos on how to do it with Aboriginal style tools. What I'm trying to do is teach you how to do it the most efficient way possible, and that's going to be with tools like this. If you want to learn how to do it, watch with the real indigenous style or Aboriginal style tools, then just look up the other videos on my YouTube channel, because man, I got a bunch of them. But this is what most people that are watching this are going to want to use. This, or the copper, or the flattened copper tools, which actually mine's missing at the moment, but that's perfectly fine. It's just hiding down in my bucket somewhere. I don't use it that much, honestly, anymore, but I do believe that people should start with that copper flat tipped, look like a flathead screwdriver that I've talked about in other videos. That's a good one to start with, and then use this to finish up, because if your cross section on your point is not super thin, this tool right here is not going to do you a heck of a lot of good, okay? You're going to have to run some serious flakes to get across it, and I know that that's one of the bigger points that people have, or bigger issues people have, is getting their projectile thin enough that they could even use a tool like this. Okay, but this is to the point where if you're to where you're making some really good preforms, or making really good points in general, and you're ready to up your game in notching and sharpening, this video is clearly for you. Okay, so what we're going to be doing here is we're going to start with the notching, and to bring you in and just kind of show you here, we're just going to run a normal side notch. Now, if you've seen some of my other videos, I love an E-style notch. Okay, so now just kind of watch what I do on this one. I may not explain it a lot. Just watch what I do, and then we'll go through and we'll discuss what I did. okay? And if you watch my other videos, you already know what I'm doing. Okay, I can't wait to get through with this one and speed it up a little bit now. I was trying to slow down so you could kind of see what I was doing a little bit, because I can't wait to get done with this one because I want to show you what I'm doing. It's kind of like playing chess in a way, okay? What you're doing is you're looking at your next future moves. You're not just making the next move by itself. You're planning ahead. Okay, and I don't do a lot of chess playing now, but I used to when I was a lot younger, okay? So we got one notch there. That's good enough right now. We may come back and look at that a little bit more, but here's what we're going to do, okay? Now I'm going to walk you through the process of what I did. If you want to go back and watch what I just did, that's perfectly fine. But realistically now, what we'll do is we'll walk through this. Now, I love an E-notch. And what I mean by an E-notch is I'm going to make two clicks, not on the same spot, but one here. Then I'm going to move up just a tiny bit, and I'm going to do one here. And then I'm going to do another one in the same exact spots, but opposite. And oftentimes what I'm going to do is look at the point. And if I have one side that's higher than the other and I need to build a platform, then what's going to happen is I'm going to look at that and say, which side do I need to remove off of first? Well, this one I don't have to worry about it because it's pretty uniform on both sides, okay? So what I'm doing now is I'm going to take one click here, and then I'm moving over ever so slightly and taking another click off there, okay? And in doing this, I'm not paying attention so much to what I'm taking off the bottom. What I'm really paying attention to is when I flip this point over, how are my platforms to remove more flakes this way? So when I do the E-notch, okay, I'm essentially making an E. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, there's another video on this where I really talk about it in depth. But though it almost makes like an E or a 3, reverse 3. You see what I'm doing with my flaker here? And so it gives me two different platforms to work off of, and if I get in a real bind, I can actually go off of the platform that's right in the middle. Okay, but I kind of want to stay away from the platform in the middle. What I'm looking at doing is I'm removing flakes here and here because I want to create platforms to remove here and here, and not necessarily straight in, but at a slight angle this way, because this is going to help me thin out as I work to notch. Okay, so I remove these. So now what I'm going to do, flip it over, and notice when I did it, I kind of ran this way a little bit and I knocked the good one out. Now I'm going to do the other one. I'm kind of going this way a little bit. Didn't get a good one. That's good enough. Okay, I can actually get one more here, because remember, as I'm doing this, I've talked about this before too, where I've taken just one off each side and I flip it. Well, you know, now this is the time where I kind of grow a little bit and I teach you something else. It's not always about just taking one perfect one off each side. I am building the platform for this side, for these next ones. If you isolate that platform in a bad way, not in a good way, not a good isolation, if you isolate your platforms to where they're only in the center plane of this point, you're going to have a very hard time removing more flakes in the future. Okay, so I'm trying to, well, before I remove that, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to raise the platform, and if you know what I'm talking about, where we remove flakes over the whole point to raise a platform so we can drive more over. Remember, this is what I'm saying, this is some advanced stuff. You got to go back and watch the other one if you don't know what I'm talking about. Look down in the description for that. I am raising the platform to the uppermost plane of this point, so when I flip it over, my platforms are now in the lower side plane, which allows them to travel further. I mean, I just knocked these super easy. Knock these, and I got one going that way, one going this way. Look at that, perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for. Now, instead of trying to drive big ones, I'm crushing that edge, and I'll take a couple little clicks here and there. What I'm doing is I'm building the plane, building the platform on the uppermost plane, and it's also knocking off, it's kind of like a braiding in a way. So I'm knocking off all the silliness it's going to break loose. So now I can flip it over and I can do the same thing. I'm going to take one here, pop that one off, one good flake. Then I'm going to come over here, pop that one off, one good flake. Then I'm going to do the same thing. Now, once you start getting a little bit closer to the center, you got to pay attention, because you're not necessarily always going to be able to build the platform on the uppermost plane. Sometimes you might need to come in. See, I looked at the point and I should have stopped and showed it to you, but I still had one more I could get off of the lower plane, and we did that. And actually I think there's another one here, but you probably can't see it like I can, just because that's the unfortunate part of the video. Okay, it didn't release easy, so I'm not going to force it. Now it's time to flip it over, and I can take another one. So you see I'm getting good flakes out of these. It's not fighting me, and it's because I'm doing one this way and one that sound, hold on. That sound bothers a lot of people. Does that bother you? It doesn't bother me at all. So, but that right there is what you're kind of looking for. So, we've got the point notched now. If you want to go a little bit further, I'm not talking about artistic notching. I'm talking about functional notching. And quite honestly, you don't even have to go in this far for it to be functional to hold the point on, to retain the point after the pitches broke loose. But people generally like notches that go in fairly far. But that's what we're looking at right there. So hopefully, if you need to go rewind it and go back and watch it again, please do it, because I think I did a really good job at articulating how to run a notch this way, or not a notch, but run a flake this way and a flake this way. And if we get in a bind, we remove that one in the middle, which I don't always do. But then as soon as I do get down to where I say, okay, the notches are done, I'm going to make sure that little platform in the middle is gone. And what I'm almost doing at this point, it's like a braiding in there, because you can be left with some really sharp flakes on the inside that'll actually cut your sinew when you pull it across. So it's like I'm just kind of crushing the edge a little bit, not trying to remove big flakes. I'm just kind of beating that up so it doesn't cut my sinew later. But that's pretty good for pretty quick old notching, isn't it? Okay, so now we're ready to sharpen this thing. And if you've watched my video before, I realized that the old video in sharpening's pretty old at this point, so it's important to go through and really show you on a point what I'm talking about, okay? But I'm going to start, it doesn't really matter where you start. Either start at the tip, start here, start at like a stop or an end point. If you just start in the middle, you can get a little bit lost. I'm not saying you can't do it that way, but what I typically like to do is come up here to this. I don't know why, it's just a habit, it's just kind of silly. And I'm looking at the serrations that are already kind of naturally in here, and I honestly can't help it. Whenever I make a point, what happens is I think my mind automatically starts making the serrations where I want them to. It's like it's just self-planning ahead. I don't intend on always doing that. It's just the way that it works. I think it's because I've been doing it for so long, and quite literally made thousands and thousands of points. And that's not speculative. That we've got records of that for the amount of points that we sell, because I sell several hundred a year. So I mean, I've been doing this a long time. Okay, so I'm going to start right about here, and I'm going to remove a flake there, and I typically get about 3, sometimes a 4th, but not normally. I'll even remove some on the back side of this, okay? And what I say when I'm removing this one flake, it's a very specific directional in towards the center, a little bit of pressure in and down. And I'm not worried about driving the most perfect flake ever, but what I'm starting to do is I'm starting to start or establish or develop. That's a great word on this. I'm developing the serration that I want to continue to enhance. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so what it's like, I'm trying to develop the serrations because I'm going to advance or enhance these serrations, okay? And we've done that on one side. Now what I'll do is I flip the whole point over, and I'm going to do it again here. So you get about 3 here. Your first couple clicks aren't that important I don't want too much space in between them, but I don't want them on top of each other either. So sometimes what happens is I have one that is oddly spaced, and if it's and I'm already seeing some flake scars in here, but they're not where it's supposed to be, I just make a new flake scar. I'm not afraid of running over top of it. I don't have to follow the initial flake scars that I made, because I'll make whole new ones, okay? But what I'm trying to do is get these fairly even, and you'll notice on my points, typically, not always as a rule, but typically the serrations get very fine at the tip. I'm not actually worried about it being super sharp here. What I'm looking for is tip geometry. That's the most important thing. When you get rounded tips, very bad for penetration. These very steep and sharp tips are great for penetration. That's what I'm after, and I'm going to show you how to develop that a little bit more too. And so my serrations will be a little bit more slight up into here. Still be sharp, not super sharp, but I'm looking for tip geometry. Now when we start getting to about the, past the first third, then we're going to get into the later 2/3 of this point, and that's where this thing needs to be sharp. And I'll tell you, these ones right here, these are going to do the most amount of massive hemorrhage possible is going to be about from here to here. This is going to get you through the skin. This is going to cut everything in its way, and it's going to be absolutely devastating on animals. When you get this stuff super sharp and you run this through something's lungs, there's no surviving that. And when people say, how fast can a stone point bring an animal down? And this is something I'm going to touch on here real quick, is people have said, well, these serrations, they hang up in the hide. There's a difference, a flat difference. I'm telling you, 100% will stand by it in front of anybody and tell them to their face. There's a difference between serrations in freaking scary sharp serrations, okay? Huge difference. If you just have serrations, they're going to get hung up and hide. It's a resistance. These things, when I'm done with it, are going to be so sharp that when I run it across, I've got permanent scar tissue. You can even see just how it's red. I test everything here, and all I ever do is cut the top layers of the skin. That is so hard because I've been doing this for years. If you've noticed me, I test it here because I can feel how sharp this stuff is. And right now, this is sharp, but I'm not pushing hard. If I push really hard, it will cut me, but it's not going to cut me. People stop when they get to this point, and even before this point, you got to take it further, okay? So understand the thirds methodology here I'm talking about. So the first third, we're trying to get through the skin. We don't want a ton of big, gnarly serrations on this first third. The last 2/3 need to start getting pretty serious, and then about from the last third, buddy, these things better be insane, because that's doing all your work, all your real hemorrhage work. This is your penetration, this is your hemorrhage. Does that make sense? Penetration at the tip, hemorrhage at the back, okay? Really important stuff. So now we've done our initial flakes all the way up and down this. Now what we can do is we can flip it over, and we need to be very direct and very specific about these. We don't want to crush the serrations into shape. We want to get it, and you can't really abrade here either, because what will happen is you'll break your edge that you have. So you need to come up here and grab a hold of one, and it's not a ton of pressure, but it's just enough, and you're going to break it away. And sometimes you'll hear a double or even a triple click. Ideally, we want a single click. Did you hear that one? Now go back, go ahead and rewind it about 7 or 8 seconds and listen to that first one. It went tick, tick, tick. We don't necessarily want that. That's not bad, but what you really want are those single clicks. Okay, there was a couple wrapped up into that one, but that happens, and it's unavoidable. But you need to practice to get the proper amount of pressure to get one click. Okay, and what I'm almost doing is, as these serrations, the leading edge is the piece that I need to be the sharpest, okay? I used to say, if you watch my old videos, that you come straight in and you work straight in. That's no longer really the case for me, okay? I keep developing and doing the best job I can possibly do. Now what I'm almost doing is I'm grabbing not directly in the center, in between. So if you got, a serration like this, instead of grabbing right in the center, what I'm almost doing is I'm grabbing here on the back side of one of these serrations, because I'm trying to remove one click, because what that's going to do is sharpen the inside leading edge of this one serration, okay? And I'm not scared. If I make a mistake and I break one off, that's not the end of the world. I didn't break one off. I was just using that as an example. But if you do, we can always come back and fix it. But if you break one or two serrations off, you got a whole bunch of other really sharp ones here. These are all little micro blades that will just cut the snot out of you. Okay? So instead of trying to drive a flake forward, it's like I'm almost grabbing forward. I'm going to draw a bigger picture. I want to make sure you understand this, because I'm going to work this one here. Okay, so follow along with me as I draw this out. So you got to see, okay, this is the serration, the inside, obviously at a small level, and so it's not developed this much. It's developed like this much, right? So instead of grabbing up here, what I'm doing is I'm putting the flaker in like this, and I'm grabbing this back corner, and I'm almost angling it this forward when I push, and then when I break it away, I break it back. Okay, so it's like I'm putting pressure on it by going in and forward, and when I break it back. And by breaking it back, it makes this trailing edge, which is not the trailing edge, it's the trailing edge of the first one. I shouldn't say that, it's not the trailing edge. Trailing edge would be the one where if this is the front serration, this would be the trailing edge. It's not, it's the leading edge. But what I'm able to do is load up a little bit of pressure, and then I round it and pop it backwards. And that makes this inside edge extremely sharp. Now you'd say, well, why don't you just come from this direction and work backwards? You can absolutely do that. In fact, I encourage people to try to do that. That's what I did for a long time. But see, the problem is what happens to me is I end up not building the pressure that I want to get that one flake. So if I come at it like this, what's happened more times than not is I've crushed the edge and I've not gotten it as sharp as it needed to be. So this is super advanced stuff, okay? I don't expect everybody to be able to jump out and do this. I've been doing this for a very long time, okay? So it's a lot of it's intuitive at this point. So as I go and push forward on the inside of this serration, and then as I want to break it, I break it back. And that's what exposes that really sharp tip. Now, that's not the only thing you need to know. Okay, there's more to it. Because if I do it and hold the point still, and you load that kind of pressure and break it back, you're putting a tremendous amount of pressure on the center of this point. Even if you do it here, do you ever notice how when you're trying to notch stuff, even it happens when you're notching too, so use this for that part of the step too. But have you ever noticed that you'll be sharpening something and you'll break it right across here? Or you'll break it across here and you're just sharpening it. That's because you're putting a lot of pressure down, and you're putting, if I pushed on this hard enough, I'd snap it right in half. That's what you're doing, is you've pushed so hard that when it finally goes, the shock wave runs in and it can't handle it, and it snaps your point. I haven't broken a point in sharpening in an extremely long time, unless there was a healed fracture or like a big crystal pocket or something like that. And the reason is, and I didn't even know I was doing it, it was intuitive, and I've talked about this a little bit, is I rock to this side. So as I want to put pressure to break that flake away, what you're going to notice is my thumb will actually pull to the side. Now watch how I do that here a second, okay? And I don't hold it up here when I sharpen it, because now I'm putting a lot of pressure here. I almost always will put my thumb in the same exact spot. Now I might rotate it forward like this, okay? And that's going to be where I compensate. But it's like almost always when I sharpen a point, you're going to notice my thumb will work up a little bit. But if you get to the tip and you start doing this, you're going to, right there, that's your pressure point. You snap tips off, that's why you're doing it, because you're putting too much pressure with your thumb, and when it finally broke loose, shock wave came up, your thumb was already pushing on it, you'll knock that tip right off every single time. Okay, so notice I keep back, and then as I grab a hold of this flake, not only am I loading the pressure and I'm pushing forward, and then I'm going to break it back towards me ever so slightly, but one of the biggest things I can do is you're going to notice this thumb is going to rock, so I'm not just pushing with the flaker, I'm rocking with my thumb to remove one single flake, and then I rotate it back in and then pull it away. So that was a little exaggerated because I'm trying to show you what I'm doing. Now when you get up towards the tip, it's not going to make as much sense. So you don't use as much of a motion. Now come back here and really watch how when I do this side, you see how I did? I leaned into it like this, and I'm going to load up pressure, and I'm going to rock the point back. I'm not pushing with the flaker. I'm loading the pressure. I can do this right here. It's loaded, but what I'm doing is I'm supporting my fingers and the flaker on my leg. Okay, and even if you nap in your hand, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to hold it in your hand and you're going to load the pressure. So what I'm doing is I load it here. I use this thumb to orient exactly where I want this. As I start rocking this flaker forward and then fixing to break it back towards me, so I rock it forward, kind of away from me, and then it's ever so slightly, I'm going to come back. Did you see how it came back? If you didn't see how it came back, go back and try to watch it again, okay? And try to do it one more time. The flaker comes back because I'm not going straight forward. I'm going here, and now I'm at a pivot point, and it rocks back like this. See how I'm torquing it, and it comes back? It's exaggerated, but that's what it's doing. But as I do that, I'm rocking back with this thumb. So I got a lot of things going on here at once. And after a while, it's not even conscious, okay? But see how I get one good click, and my flaker is ever so slightly coming back. It's not straight down. I'm going to do one that's straight down right now. Do you hear the tone difference? If you couldn't hear the tone difference, rewind it, and I'm hoping that the camera grabbed it. But not only that, it didn't give me that hook, curl, sharp edge. Okay? So kind of remove that last little one. So when you do this, I'll try to draw it here on my leg so you can see it. Normally what happens, you remove that, it'll turn into a C like this. Well, if you put that pressure forward and then pull it back and rock this, it'll go like this. You know what that looks like? Looks like a chainsaw file. So see what I'm trying to draw here? Instead of just being like this, it goes like this. And I tell you what, that edge, that leading edge, is insane sharp. Okay? And I know that there's probably going to be somebody who watches this and says, you're incorrect, and I can do one sharper, or you're doing it wrong. And that's fine. That's perfectly fine. I think throughout history, there's other people that sharpen different ways. The difference is, I would never claim that my way is the only way or the best way, okay? I think it's a pretty darn good way because we kill a lot of animals doing this. A lot. And it makes them sharp. Oh, man. That is sharp. When you hit one of these, one or two of these, it is insane. The best thing is not every single one has to be insane. But if you look at the majority, maybe 2/3 of these are insane sharp, which they are. I'm telling you, it doesn't take much. You touch it lightly, and these things want to lay you open. And if they don't, like on this one, needs a little bit more refining, then you can go at it again. Now, as I come back through a second turn, remember before I was working this way and I was popping them back to me. Now, when I need to touch them up, now that initial backwards flake has been removed. Now I come from the front and I touch it up ever so slightly. Okay? Ever so slightly. Because you're always going to have one side that's a little sharper than the other. Man, that is crazy. That one right there is nuts. And this one here. But we can refine that just a little bit more. There's another one of the things I always talk about. If you can make it sharper, man, make it sharper. Okay? Don't quit on it. Just keep going. Okay, now, so we got the edge done. I love the edge. It's everything. When you hold this thing in your fingers, no, it's like I can grab this and pull it out. And it's, I mean, I think if you squeeze it, my fingers are tough. It would cut you. But it's, you can feel it in your fingers how sharp it is when you hold this point, okay? Now, when we talk about the tip, I see a ton of people that put these, they'll carry these big serrations, they follow my videos and they listen to what I say, they'll do them right all the way up to the tip. Well, that initial penetration tip that you need, if you have these big serrations, it's not going to do any good. So now what I do is I actually take the flaker, and you do the same thing with a deer antler, just the same, is I'm actually going to crush the tip. Okay? And I'll grab onto maybe these, listen to it a second. It's not a straight crush, it's very light. And I don't mind going up the first third. And even knocking the serrations off. I don't care, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's perfectly sharp here. In the first third, remember the back third's going to cut the hell out of everything. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to eliminate resistance. Okay, and I don't mind using the side to remove flakes. I don't want to totally crush it yet. Okay, I'll remove flakes where I can, a little bit here and there, and I keep going up and down it, you'll notice, and removing flakes because I want as little resistance on this tip as possible. Okay, let me see if I can get the camera to really focus in on that. Okay, so what you're looking at here is more serrations, and then it starts getting less, but you notice it's not abrupt. It's not like I went from straight smooth edge to serration. It's gradual. I'm going from smaller serrations they don't have to be perfect sharp, but they're still pretty sharp, to where now we're getting into the nasties. Okay, up here is where the nasty stuff is. But I don't want a point of hang up. When people say serrations hang up in the hide, it's because they do these big gnarly serrations out towards the tip, and the tip's not refined enough. So that's typically where the problem lies. So now what we can do is, I have no problem whatsoever using the side of the flaker to almost grind the tip to remove these micro flakes that really aren't even sharp at all. I mean, they're sharp, but they're it's such a light degree. You're not really you're not lacerating. What you're trying to do is you're creating a point of penetration, not hemorrhage. And I'll tell you what, that little tip right there is sharp, is all get out. I don't need to abrade this one, but if we do take an abrader, this is another tip you can do. Support it with the back side and actually slightly abrade the knot on the tip. And now I'm not trying to sharpen it like a steel knife, okay? That's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is knock off little micro flakes at the tip. I don't care if the side, I don't care if the cutting edge is sharp down here. I don't care. I really don't care, because this is getting us our penetration. Once you get through that hide, it's like popping a balloon. Okay? It doesn't take anything to pop the balloon at the beginning. Well, that's the thing. When you get about, but the hide flexes, right? So I can push this in. You see how I do that right there on my skin? Watch how, can you see that, how my skin pushes in? Well, that skin, I mean, I'll tell you what, that thing's sharp. But as I push, I don't want to go any further than that because she's going to puncture me. But as I push in, the skin flexes. So when this thing's flying, what's going to actually happen is it's going to push the skin into about maybe here or so, the first third, and before it finally gives way and punctures through. It's not trying to cut right here. By the time the skin actually overlays this point, it's going to be up this tip 3/8 of an inch. I don't need it to cut right here. What I need it to do is be streamlined, to have very little resistance to push through the animal. Once this tip pops at, it's like popping a balloon. It's going to shove through. This you can absolutely see. Okay, huge point of information here. In the book that I'm doing, I talk about this specifically. We did tests on this where I stuck points on deer hide, and it literally gathered the deer hide up around this point, and then eventually we hit the point where we had enough weight on it, and when it shoves through, it goes all at once. Okay? It'll build up, build up, build up, and then it shoves all at once. And what we noticed is, through the test, is the more obstruction was up here, the more weight it took to push that point through that deer hide. It does not need to be sharp here. I can rub my finger right here and it's not going to cut me. But when I get back here, that's when it's sharp, because this right here is going to pop that skin like a balloon. And when you see it in the tests, once you get that initial penetration, the rest of it shoves through really fast. Okay? It just, that's the way that this works. It's like popping a balloon. Once it shoves through, these outer 2/3 do all the cutting, all the lacerating, all the hemorrhage. If you sharpen a point like this, that will be the most devastating point that you'll ever shoot an animal with. Steel, stone, anything. It is insane how sharp these are. And when people say, oh, stone points can't take down animals as quick as steel points, shove one of these through the lungs of an animal, and I tell you, we drop deer and hogs faster with stone points like this than we do steel points. That's not much. It's not like, oh, stone points are so much better, you should always be shooting those. No, steel points were perfectly fine. They penetrate easier, they lacerate easier, they're easier to sharpen. But there have been many occasions where we put animals down faster with a shot through the lungs with these than steel points. And when I say faster, I'm talking about a couple seconds faster. I'm not saying it's like, again, it's not so insanely fast that everybody's an idiot for shooting steel points, because that's not true at all. It's not what I'm saying. But people that say that you can't kill stuff with stone points, or that they don't cut properly, you have to track them for a long time, it's because they don't know how to get them sharp. Okay, so thanks for following along, and I really hope that this helps put you where you need to be on creating the deadliest stone points that you've ever made possible, okay? So if you want to get them from us, absolutely, we sell hundreds and hundreds of these things a year. They're really, really good. I'll absolutely put my name by them. Plus, if you shoot stuff with them and you send me a really, like a nice picture I can use on my website or social media, I replace the stone point for free. You keep the old one, and I send you a brand new one to use. I don't think anybody offers that ever, period. So if that's interesting to you, check it out at HuntPrimitive.com, and I'll catch you on the next adventure.